Yorbers at home. My name is Jesse Simpson, and today we're going to be speaking with our very special guest, Shannon McGarity. And if you're here, you might have already seen some of our other interviews, but if not, YORB was an interactive television series that came out of ITP, which is the interactive telecommunications program at NYU in the early 1990s. And Shannon worked on the series, and we are lucky enough to have her here today. So Shannon, thank you very much for being here.
Oh, wow. Thank you for having me. It was it's already been a walk down memory lane. I had to dig deep. It was great.
Nice. Well, before we flash back to the beginnings of YORB, I was wondering if you might be able to tell us a little bit about your background and what you're up to now.
Okay, sure. So I entered ITP straight out of undergrad as a video major from Ohio University. So I was one of the few undergrad straight to graduate school folks in that group. So I was pretty young, and I kind of really dove into technology and into all of the web was just becoming the web, right? And we were like working on DVD-ROMs and stuff. So my path after ITP ended up being a lot about web design and interaction design, visual design, creative direction, on up into more broad user experience design and service design. I've worked in consultancies, in startups, I've had my own business. And I am now at the end of an engagement with a company called Design It, that I am a director of design there. And one of the things that I did is for the last 3 years, in addition to the consulting work, I've been working on providing trainings through a company called Cooper Professional Education that helps, different organizations help their employees to transform, like creative employees to transform. So that means providing trainings and coaching around design leadership and service design and user experience.
Very cool. I actually, I hope you won't be freaked out, but I have a follow-up question to that I'll get to later based on some research I did on you earlier. So.
Oh my gosh. All right.
Cool. So before all of that, though, you served as a grad assistant on YORB.
Yep.
And I was wondering, you sort of just broached on it, but can you tell us a little bit about what brought you to ITP specifically as a program back then, and also how you ended up working on YORB in particular?
So when I was an undergrad, I was in an honors program at OU called the Honors Tutorial Program, and you could study anything you wanted to, and you didn't have any prerequisites or anything you had to take. Which, as you can imagine, for an 18 to 21-year-old, there's very little constraint there. So I just did a bunch of different things. I directed and produced a television show called My New Roommates, and did a bunch of TV work. And when I was ready to graduate and I'd done my thesis on virtual reality, I was like, I don't know what I want to do. and my counselor, Dr. Buzz Clift, said, "Oh, I know of two programs, but I think there's one that's really going to be great for you, and it stair steps from your interest in virtual reality, et cetera. So why don't you go check out this new program? We have one person from OU who's also gone through this program, Eric Levanchi. You should go try it out." And so I interviewed I think Katie Swan remembers me as that person who came in with a Laura Ashley outfit, and a corduroy blazer, et cetera. And I came in all like, yes, I'm here to be at ITP. It was so ridiculous. I was such a youth, but something clicked, and they brought me on. So yeah, I think Red had always, she had a bias towards people that had life experience. And I get that. What life and work experience would have been incredibly helpful in many ways. And instead of having all of that life lived and all the stories to tell, I had a real focus on technology and design. And so I threw myself into that. And I would say for the first The first semester, I didn't have a graduate assistantship. I worked in the video department, film and video downstairs in the Tisch building. So that was pretty cool. I, facilitated in-studio productions and things like that. But ultimately, the second semester, I was asked to be a GA for, like a tech GA. So helping people with tools and technologies. And at the end of that, I ended up really connecting with Nick West, and Nick said, "I want you to come on and be my producer, my junior producer at YORB."
Can you talk a little bit about what kind of like day-to-day activities you were responsible for during YORB, and just like the kinds of technologies you guys were interfacing with and how it all worked?
Yeah, and I'll try to remember. It's funny because I came on just as Nick was taking the mantle of YORB from Dan. Like Dan had handed it over and said, "Okay, do something new," and so he did. And Nick's vision was a rendered 3D space that really focused on the the experience of like a really immersive experience that felt human and had a lot of texture. And so he worked with Big Twin to create these models, and one of my jobs in those initial days was to point the camera at a model and render to render paths through this 3D space. So when you see all of those pre-rendered 3D paths, I mean, Nick did a lot of them, but I also helped in that regard. I would do, I remember like nights just coming back to see if the render had stopped or not. It was all encompassing. I did any kind of visual design work that needed to be done or that I could do. Sometimes, I just remember these days where, Nick would decide that he was going to reconfigure the entire technology stack. There were modems and serial connections and multiple computers that this thing was running on. And I just remember spending a lot of time with him in that teeny tiny little shoebox room, like cabling, a lot of cabling. And then when it was time for our, the show, then there would be trying to graft all the student projects onto this world, so all of these, pre-rendered movies within Director, we'd have to like code them into Director, and then there'd be more cabling because, there were projects that, kind of went outside of the room. There was a lot there, and I would say I wasn't the most technical of people. I learned a lot in that moment, but I think probably where I spent a lot of my time was also doing, visual work or helping to, I spent a lot of time in Fractal Painter. I remember that, which it doesn't exist anymore. I mean, I guess it was Photoshop and Illustrator before that existed. Anyway.
Nice. Yeah, I'm not familiar with it, but it sounds, I like the name.
You could paint with brushes that looked real.
Yeah. Nice.
I mean, yeah, it felt important then.
So you mentioned Nick, who we've heard quite a bit about through some other people. And
yep.
We've already interviewed Tom Igoe, Dan O'Sullivan, Madeline Altman, and Eric Fixler, who all worked on YORB in the past. Yeah. And then we also interviewed David Rios, who I think we mentioned in an email correspondence. Mm-hmm. He was a viewer back then who had called into the show a number of times, and now he's a full-time professor at ITP.
Okay.
And so I was just wondering if there are other people who you remember working with back then, or if it was just you and Nick, and kind of what sort of memories you have from like the internal team of producing the show.
Of course, Nick. But Nick was so focused on community and democratizing that space that we worked with so many people, and everybody. I think there were so many people in my year and the year after that wanted to create projects for the YORB. And so I could literally, I went through that video that I sent you and just like remembered all of the people that we worked with. There was this amazing space called Dollywood. It was YORB surreal game space. And I had this group of friends, Matt Zymet, Dan Moss, Dan Schrecker. They created these incredible 3D game spaces that were just so cool and surreal. And I was like, oh, there's Despina, and she got videoed for the introduction to Dollywood. And oh, there's Miriam Goldberg's voice as the narrator. So I am wormholing. I got to wormhole a lot into different people that we worked with. Other people are Kevin Walker and John Hartfield, who created, and Scott Etten, who created the YORB bar and all the dancing avatars. That was amazing. Nick was so incredible at driving interest towards the YORB, and he wanted to create more narrative spaces. So he would then pull in somebody like I think it was Dan and Steve Badeau. They created these, as you'll see from the video, they created these narratives that would pop up in different places in the YORB, and you try to piece it together. I mean, there's so many. I mean, I could go on and on. You just tell me when you want to stop. Oh, except for I do want to say that another person, one of my thesis project was a project that I did in conjunction with Jessica Safran, who is no longer with us. She passed away several years ago. She had connections to the education and the education community. So we created, for our thesis, we created a school in conjunction with the School of the Future. And we worked with an educator there to give out cameras to all of the students to photograph where they lived in the 5 boroughs, and then we put all of those images up on a map. And I think you'll see that too. It shows up in the demo that I sent you. But like, Jessica was so passionate about kids and education and providing a voice to those kids, and I was so impacted by getting to work with her. She was an incredible individual.
Another question I had that I mentioned earlier, just because you brought up education, and so I saw on your LinkedIn profile that you recently developed a course on how to design remote educational workshops.
Yeah.
And that's something that we've been talking a lot about, particularly just, when ITP went remote this past semester, I think everybody, in all educational institutions was talking about, like, okay, how do we move classes to an online format? Yeah. And particularly for next semester at ITP, I think there are some classes that really are much more physically oriented. And so it's something that we're all talking about. So I'm really curious in hearing, about your sort of philosophy around designing for online learning. Yeah. And maybe if you could just give us an overview of what your experience has been there.
Yeah. So working for an organization that did a lot of in-person training for the past 3 years, all of a sudden COVID hits and we have to pivot. And one of the ways that we pivoted was thinking about, workshops aren't going to go away. Clients, designers are still going to need to align clients on a mission and help them ideate together and evaluate those ideas over time and have really rich discussions. How are we going to do that in this current space? And as an organization, the company, the strategic design consultancy that Cooper was a part of, there were a lot of amazing practitioners that had a lot of experience also pivoting in this moment with their clients. So we did what we teach our clients to do is, do research, talk to people, understand what is working for them and what's not working for them. And ultimately we created a course that it juxtaposed 2 different pieces of technology. There was Miro and Zoom. And we combined these 2 platforms together to deliver 4 modules. The first module is about fundamentals, So understanding what are the fundamentals, what is possible in this moment? What does these new constraints make possible? And think about it, like unlearn the things that we know about in-person facilitation. How can we approach this in a new way? And what does it open up for us? So we did a fundamentals course a fundamentals module on how to approach creating a workshop as if it were a service that you're providing. So looking at it through a service design lens. And then after that, once the client had understood like, oh, here are these like 6 steps that you take, then let's dive into 3 different modules, one around discussion and alignment, one around ideation, and one around evaluation. And let's kick the tires on a bunch of different tools. Some of those tools we converted from our in-person practices, but some we created anew in that space. And so, yeah, I've delivered that course once, and it went really well. I think the goal is to get people inspired about what's possible and not, what can't we do anymore?
It's interesting how we're all having to kind of face this at the same time for this external reason, but it's nice that, so many platforms kind of exist to allow for it also.
Yeah, I kind of wanted now I'm so curious. I want to know how you all are approaching it for the next year. How did that work out this year?
For all of us as research residents at ITP, we were mostly involved in the thesis class for students who were about to graduate.
Yeah.
And so, we used Zoom for like class facilitation. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I don't think that there was any specific strategy beyond just, trying to maintain the community aspects and, continuous collaborative vibes amongst. I think some classes may have encouraged more collaboration among students.
Yeah. So this iteration of YORB was inspired by that pivot moment. I'm curious, what were the constraints, or what were the goals? Like, what did you decide that you wanted to accomplish with this iteration?
I think being able to provide students with a place to have less structured hangout and less structured activities.
Yeah.
Because I think we were already communicating on X number of platforms: Slack, Discord, email, SMS, WhatsApp groups, whatever, dynamic sort of random student arrangements exist, as well as Zoom, obviously. So this was more provided to be kind of like a drop-in, drop-out space that would replicate the way that the floor acts as a social space as well as a workspace. So it's something where your goal for being on the floor is not necessarily to hang out with other people or to, but you're always having these random interactions with classmates that encourage you to think about projects differently, encourage you to think about your own work differently, or you can be helping other people.
Yeah.
So it's very valuable as a space, but a very difficult thing to replicate in the digital space.
Totally. That serendipity of meeting somebody on the couch and they see what you're reading, or they see you're having a problem, and those moments are, they're valuable.
Exactly. And so I think one of the goals was that you could just kind of keep this open in a tab, or take a 5-minute break and jump into YORB. I think in some ways that was effective, and in some ways less so. In some ways, what the experience of YORB has proven to be is allowing that spontaneity, but only when you plan to be there together, because it's you're not realistically going to keep this open in a tab for hours at a time, because your computer's going to get very hot, among other things, until we figure out some optimization.
I totally get that. I think there's a commitment that has to happen. And I think a lot of different organizations are trying to figure out what is the right level of balance in that commitment. How on do we have to be all of the time? You know, when does it make sense? Are there, you know, did you experiment with hours and different like times that people would show in that space?
I think we've had a number of events in this space, and those are inevitably the most fun, exciting times. And you do see the space really come alive. You see people spreading out. You see people like going on trips outside together. Because this is still an open part of the space. But I do love the idea of open hours, and the floor is open from 3 to 4 p.m. every day or something along those lines.
To pivot back a little bit, so you had mentioned like the types of content, or you mentioned specific pieces of content that you worked on and other students were working on. Were you a part of the YORB class at the time, or was the class going on?
Oh, it's a good question. I don't remember if it was a class. I do know that people use the YORB as the platform for their thesis projects or for their end of, for their end of semester projects. I don't remember if there was a class per se. I was definitely not a part of it. I mean, I was living my entire life through the YORB lens, but it was all one big 24-hour class for me, I guess.
Right. We've done some research on other public access shows that were on at the time in Brooklyn. And I'm just curious about your perception of like other interactive media that was around back then, and how YORB kind of fit in with what else was going on.
I mean, I think it was incredibly unique, just the mixture of art and technology that was happening. When I think about the shows that were happening at that time, I'm thinking about Squirt TV. Like there were call-in shows that people were, having conversations, but they didn't necessarily have a technology component. I think after graduation, probably in the 2 years after that, I remember the Sci-Fi Channel being one of the first channels that actually spent a lot of time towards investing in the community and the kind of virtual community component of the shows that they were producing. I think Charlene Smith and who else was at Sci-Fi? I can't remember anymore, but I remember thinking, oh, they're doing some really interesting stuff. But I think you'll have to reach out to them.
Do you have any memories of interacting with Red in regards to YORB?
I mean, everybody has Red memories. She was amazing. I have her photo up on my inspiration board at home, because she was such a unique human. And, the fact that she picked up a video camera, in her late 40s and then founded this program, so incredible. And so I think what I remember about her was she spoke truth to power. She told you she was speaking unvarnished opinion. Sometimes that was hard, but always I believe it was done with a grounding of love underneath it. She just wanted you to be great. She wanted people to tell amazing stories. I thought she was incredible, bringing together this huge network, this universe of people to help us understand the many possibilities of technology and how it could impact our practice. That applications class, I learned what I did not know in that class, and I'll always be grateful for that. She was fun and feisty, and she poked at you, and she wasn't afraid to get in there and see where see what might not have been true.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mention applications, because I think that ends up being a class that everybody really appreciates at the end of first semester, and so it's nice to know that it was it's been such a long running course at ITP, and so powerful for so many.
It's foundational. You just get it's a sampler platter. and you get to pick and choose what affinity you have. And I had an education, focus. So I really enjoyed the pieces that were, focused in that regard. And I feel like she brought Chris Whittle in one time. Like, she brought in a bunch of people that I'm like, oh, I know who that person is. Oh, I vaguely know who that person is. And it just expanded my awareness in a way that I'll always be grateful for.
I'm curious, have you ever had any experiences where people either knew of YORB later on in life, like sort of outside of the ITP context, and if this has resurfaced in your life at all?
I don't know that I had any, oh, you used to be on the YORB. I haven't had any of those moments. I think what's always fun is when I use it as a fun fact a lot. Oh yeah, I used to be a associate producer on an interactive television show in the early 90s, and it was on public access. And I think when people see that fun fact, they're like, "Oh, what was that about?" That was before the internet. I mean, not really, but Yeah. So I think it's a great conversation starter. I went to ITP straight out of undergrad. It shaped who I am today because of the people that I met there. I lived with ITP people. I am still friends with some of those people. Like Madeline, I connected with her a couple of years ago in Germany. Nick was always a lifetime mentor. I just feel I go back to those shows now and again and just I feel grateful to have a place that I can continually tap in to inspiration, and get a little taste of that amazing energy that we had in those early days.
You sort of answered my closing question, but I was just going to ask, like, looking back and reflecting on YORB as a project that you worked on for a couple of years, how, what does YORB mean to you, and how have you brought it into other aspects of your life and career going forward?
There was something about experimentation and trying things out that continues to resonate today for someone in the user experience world. I'm always amazed that Nick had, his vision was so entirely different. And I think that he was focused on user experience work in that second iteration in a way that now I look back and I think, wow, you were really caring for people. You were trying to bring people together to share art and narrative and stories. The idea that he was thinking about experiences for people, and the level of detail he put into those avatars and wanting people to see that the mouths talked, the mouths moved when you talked, and there was a halo when you were the leader. Like, I look back on that, I'm like, wow, he was pushing things. And I think that probably gave me a really amazing foundation for the work that I did, whether it was, my consulting work or, in doing my own personal projects.
Is there anything else, either questions for us or any memories that you have that you might want to share? Or?
We talked a lot. I think we hit a lot of these places. There was the artist colony, and there was Ritual Ground Zero, where we played instruments. And I can't remember, I'm so bad with names, I can't remember the two awesome artists that were a part of that experience. But I remember that being one of the most awesome and creative spaces that people love to go to.
Could you sort of recount on some of the spaces? Because I don't think we've necessarily heard of a lot of them.
Oh, okay. There was alternate reality theater. That was a project. That was a student project, and they used faces, and we'd give a prompt. They would give a prompt for like what the story should be, and then the two callers, each one would have like an avatar, and they would have to try to tell a story through that avatar based on the prompt. That was fun. We did, let's see, there was the drive-in where people uploaded. I believe that Nick had a place, maybe it was on, I don't think it was on Echo, I don't think we could do it then, but I think there was a place that you could upload your videos, your digital videos, and then he would put them in the drive-in. So there were videos of people, taking, imagery at a monster truck rally, or, there would be conceptual videos from, one of our digital video courses. That was fun. People liked going there. Like I said, I think it was Dan and Steve Badeau. I think they worked on like these nonlinear narratives that they peppered throughout the YORB city, where you would go past something and all of a sudden you would get a glimpse, like this kind of surreal glimpse into a narrative, and you had to piece it together, and you would be able to piece it together if you, navigated the space enough. So that was interesting. I mean, it's funny, there was awkwardness around that version of YORB, because there were pre-rendered paths and you kind of had to stick within the, and it took a long time to get from place to place.
Right.
But I think also it gave us space to talk and reflect and have conversations. That was pretty fun. We had all of these kids that would call in. There was Commando, there was Alberto, who else? And they would call in and just, they're at home and they want to chat. And apparently they wanted to chat with an adult, and navigate the space together. It was a great place for kids, and it was a great place for adults to explore as well. Oh, Hector too. I remember Hector. Hector called in all the time. He was great. You'll see that on the video that I shared.
I think that, yeah, Tom mentioned someone in an email that you were on, and I think it might have been Hector. I'll have to look back.
That version of YORB, it felt like everybody wanted to invest in it or be a part of it in some way and share and contribute to it. And I think that was the most fun, connecting with people.
Was there some sort of handoff between you and
Madeline?
Yeah, like how did the transition?
I don't think there was a technical transition. I think there was a party. I remember a party where Big Twin created an illustration of me and put the illustrations on popsicle sticks. And so I showed up in this room, in this closet, and everybody was in there with like my face, like as a mask. I think that was the limit. I think that was the handover. I think I also probably had a talk with Madeline about, okay, you're going to have to sit next to Nick for really long periods of time, and he's going to inevitably drive you insane with humming the sleigh ride song. It's going to be a Christmas song, and it's going to make you nuts, but it's also going to like live in your memory forever. So be cool with that.
Nice.
But she already knew Nick, and she was already tight with him. So, I mean, I think she had a good sense of what was going to be, what that experience was going to be like. And like I said, I was not the techiest of the ITPers. So there was less fundamental knowledge that I was handing off and more, I don't know. I think I was a community builder.
Yeah.
In that role.
Do you have any specific memories with Big Twin that you might want to share?
Big Twin was awesome. I would go and hang out at his studio while he was doing renderings as well. He was so helpful, and he helped me understand 3D work. He was a good guy. He was fun, and he made creation fun. It's so amazing how people went off and did incredible things. The alumni from the people from ITP, they go off and have just done incredible work, and it's diverse work. It's not just digital work. I think that's always incredible. Something I think about and marvel about.
Shannon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah,
and we really appreciate your time and getting a little bit of the history of YORB.
Thanks for having me. It's been great being in the time machine. I really appreciate it. You guys have done amazing work. I'm super excited to see it live on. Thanks again. Take care, everybody. Bye. Really appreciate. Nice to meet you too. I hope this isn't the last. See you soon. Bye.
Call us at 443-YORB. If you get through, you'll become a face on the dashboard. If If a halo appears around your face, that means the host has made you pilot. When you become pilot, you may use the buttons on your phone to drive through the world. In this case, you would press 1 to go left, 2 to go forward, and 3 to go right. So don't be shy, call us at 443-YORB.